Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of Alien Lizard Humanoids. Today we'll be looking at the case of Igor and Grichka Bogdanoff. We'll start with the introductions. Jeff?
My name is Jeff Pincin. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Delaware and Pennsylvania, and specialize in the treatment of OCD and other anxiety disorders. We're not going to do questions this time, but please leave any questions or comments in the comments section, and we might respond to them in future videos. We haven't released a lot lately, just with the holidays and making sure we're all staying healthy with COVID and any COVID scares or anything. So hopefully we'll be able to get back on track.
It's a scary time with COVID.
Yeah, pandemic, right?
Last couple of years.
If I wasn't a counselor, I wanted to be a creator of unnamed technologies to help people do whatever they want to improve their appearance. Turns out this is probably illegal. I don't have any knowledge of it, and it's not at all worth the risk. So I had to settle for counseling. Another tough break.
It's a tough break.
Right.
It's a tough break.
Challenging outcome there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Mike.
My name is Mike Smith, also a licensed professional counselor in the state of Delaware. I specialize in narrative therapy and geek therapy. I'm a self-styled expert in all things geek. And if I had not become a counselor, I think I really wanted to be like a TV host for like a sci-fi show, like introducing a new sci-fi show. But, by the time I got old enough for people to take me seriously in that role, like they pretty much stopped having the framing device around the shows and just like, here, watch this show. Oh, and YouTube. Go check it out. I ended up having to settle for being a counselor.
Oh, yeah, another one.
Yeah.
That's another broken dream.
Really?
Shattered, really. I wanted to be with the greats up there, with Elvira. Mistress of the Night. But
I also like the song Elvira. Who sang that? It was the one had a very low voice. You know what I'm talking about? I think it was four men. One had a very, very low voice, and I think it was Elvira where he kind of showed that off.
Oak Ridge Boy. It says Oak Ridge Boys.
Oak Ridge Boys.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Elvira.
I'm not familiar with that song.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's older song, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so this pair, we'll get to a summary in a second here with Jeff, but this pair, I think it's important to emphasize that these guys were very, very popular in France, like mega celebrities in France. Not really known extensively outside of France to the same, not anywhere near the same level, but they were some type of meme or like the subject of many memes with cryptocurrency or something.
Much in more recent years, they became really associated with cryptocurrencies and the ups and downs, and they kind of leaned into it.
Made it work.
They were the overlords. Like, there's memes about them like, oh, that cryptocurrency thing's doing well? Dump it.
That's their thing, yeah.
I mean, that's what they do best is they lean into these things as to not look bad or as to not, I'll use that loosely, as to not look bad. But
in their early life, it was truly accurate.
As to not think that they look bad, or just any chance for them to not be in the spotlight or something like that. They're very, I think, probably very calculated in how they did a lot of things to make sure that their I keep wanting to say appearance, but it is, I just can't use that word.
Strikes you as the wrong word, right?
Just to make sure that they're that they always feel like they're on top.
That they're presenting themselves.
Presenting. Here you go.
Presentation.
I can't say appearance. Can't say looks. We can't. I can't hold up a picture of them, but it's. You got to look up a picture of these guys because extremely unique features.
It's highly dichotomous, right? So it's completely dichotomous. At one point, they looked, I would say, normal. I think most people would say attractive. And then something happened.
Many people found them very, very attractive, especially when they were younger and on TV.
Yeah,
they were really, really attractive, and just as they got older, their appearance changed.
Yeah, so it's relatively suddenly. Yeah, but we'll talk about the unexplained modification or happenstance that led to.
I do think it's important to note that both of them died relatively recently. We're filming this in January of 2022. and that is when Igor died at the beginning of January 2022, January 3rd. His brother, Grichka, died a few days before that in December, on the 28th of December 2021.
Yeah, it was about, what, 6 days apart, something like that. But so different years, but only 6 days apart. All right, Jeff, let's hear a background about the Bogdanoff twins.
Yeah. Just note here that Mike says Grichka and Igor are much better than I do. So again, we'll focus on how much we can butcher pronunciation. But they're both the twins, born August 29th, 1949, to Austrian and German nobility, and they're both French actors, controversial in claiming knowledge of physics topics. So they hosted a popular French science show in the 70s. But they were criticized. They did not have the knowledge or background to teach on these topics. And they doubled down on it and both received PhDs, one in the late 90s, one in the early 2000s, but passed with the lowest possible grades. So again, and they published works that they had published have received a lot of scrutiny for just the not having the content was not that it was a lot of fluff is the way that it was described, like buzzwords and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So their credibility really took a hit. But they always tried to be in the spotlight. They always tried to kind of one up and tried to make themselves appear better. So we had already alluded to later on in their lives, in the 90s, 2000s, their appearance started to change. And I mean, to everyone else, it's injections or surgery or something. But at the time of their death, really had a face looked really like a caricature. Something that an artist might do at an amusement park or something. Real long chin, kind of big lips, cheekbones, stuff like that.
Gigantic cheekbones.
Yeah. And so
they both denied any kind of plastic surgery or Botox or anything like that. They said that they never had any work done.
They made a lot of effort to not look 72 years old. And they're 72 at the time that they died. Made a lot of effort to make sure that they didn't look that or look different or something. Now they said that it was that they had experimented with unnamed technologies. So of course we don't know what that is or what exactly it was.
Did you develop those technologies, Jeff?
I could have. I mean, if I knew anything about it or...
Oh, right. If you knew anything about engineering and
anything.
That side of science.
Exactly. So it's hard to believe that they didn't do something, but obviously we don't know. So like Mike said, they died fairly recently. Grichka at the end of 2021, December 28th. Igor 6 days later, January 3rd. Now, they were very vocal about being anti the COVID vaccine, and they believed that the vaccine had not been developed for long enough, or there wasn't enough time to develop it safely. And they thought they were healthy, strong enough. They weren't going to die from COVID or weren't going to experience symptoms.
They died of COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Both of them.
Both of them.
Yeah.
So didn't get vaccine, ended up dying, of course. And so that's where we're at now. It's
interesting that they were so anti-COVID vaccine because it was very specifically anti-COVID vaccine. They weren't generally anti-vax. Like both of them had said, no, we believe vaccines work. We just don't think that the COVID vaccine had enough time to become efficient because they didn't know enough about the science to know that the COVID vaccine had been in development for 10 years prior to COVID-19.
If they only knew anything about math and physics, right?
Right. All they had to do was tinker with the mechanisms to make sure that it worked with COVID-19 before it could come out.
Yeah, they were waiting for a future vaccine, which they believed would be more effective or something. But, I mean, the current vaccines are very effective. So I really don't know what they were thinking. I don't know if that was something they thought that connected them with their audience. Because it seemed like they were always trying to make a comeback after, like, 2010. It was always about, like, getting back on top. And maybe that was part of the desperation. The vaccine issue has been divisive, and people are very vocal on both sides. So activate a base, to say something like that. I don't know.
They leaned into some of this stuff, like really trying to save face. I think they said that one of the things you said.
I'm telling you can't say much without just landing on those puns.
It just comes naturally. It's a good
Naturally, yeah. See, but it wasn't natural. Yeah.
They claim it was natural. They said it was completely natural. And 2010, like after they started leaning into things, they said they were proud to have faces like extraterrestrials. Proud to have alien faces.
I think they accomplished that goal pretty well. Yeah. So if you look back, I'm going to go through their history here. They have kind of a very low probability journey, right? Every point in their life, just these low probability events occur, and you're like, I don't get this. How are they maneuvering through the system? A lot of people would look at them and think that they're not too bright. I think that's a relatively fair knee-jerk judgment to make based on just kind of the initial look, like something blew up.
Especially if you look at them in their earlier lives.
Yeah, and you do it side by side.
They definitely had, when they were on TV in the late 70s, early 80s, definitely had the I don't know, himbo vibe. They had this vibe of being like, we're pretty. And that's about it, was the vibe, kind of the vibe they gave off. I think they were smarter than that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I think that it wasn't that they were unintelligent. It's just they weren't at the, PhD in mathematics or physics, that's a very intellectually demanding profession. That's really one of the most, you could argue. And they jumped from TV host to trying to get that. We'll talk about trying to get the PhDs, or I guess technically getting them.
Right.
But they spoke French, English, German, and Russian. They had a pretty good education growing up. They were well-spoken. They were liked on TV. They were really superstars. And they didn't do a terrible job. I think what happened is, Jeff, as you mentioned, they wandered into more advanced topics on the show and started kind of speculating about things they didn't know about. And they got some pushback, and I think that maybe is what prompted them to say, well, I'll get the degree and prove to you that the nonsense I'm talking about is actually not nonsense. They're going reverse, right? They're trying to get the degree to prove that they weren't talking about nonsense.
Their show started out great. It was introducing sci-fi shows from other countries to the French audience. Things like Doctor Who, Star Trek. They were the framing device. They had the job I wanted. Like they were the guys presenting, like, hey, look at this new sci-fi thing and watch this. And then they would kind of talk about some of the science-related topics that were coming up in those shows. And that's where they started getting some pushback because they were speculating in areas and people were like, you don't have any expertise in that. Why are you talking about it?
Yeah.
But they were really popular.
They really were. And I think it just goes to show you that the star power can take you quite a distance. And France, they were, things kind of exploded later on, but in the beginning, they did very well, even though they were making some claims they couldn't support.
At that point, of course, it would have been a perfect opportunity for them to step back and, maybe you're right. Maybe we just kind of overstepped the boundary a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't have said, made all these, talked about things we didn't quite know about. But, of course, many people do that. And then they I want to stay in the spotlight, or I want to do whatever. I want to show people how great I am, whatever the case might be. And then just keep going, try to double down on it. And you had a chance to really kind of save yourself, save face. But, you took the chance and you kept going, you kept doing it. And obviously that didn't ultimately have good outcome for them, because it's not like they really gained a lot of credibility, because everything was just even more questioned after that.
Right. They could have gained a lot more credibility with that show if when they started getting that pushback, bring on experts.
That's a good idea.
Bring on people who do have that expertise, ask them questions, and then, slowly over time work on getting the doctorates and be like, hey, yeah, guess what? We got these doctorates. We're now part of the expertise, and we've been working on this for a long time. Could have stayed kind of maybe in the public eye a little bit more while they worked on that. But they didn't. They were just kind of doubled down on we're right.
Yeah, they puffed up their credentials. Right.
Not faces.
Definitely not faces.
Not at that time.
So their first move, before they got into what I'll call a fake degree, because I think they had a fake degree. I don't know how. There's no nice way to put it. That is just my opinion. In 1991, they published a book titled God Science. So they weren't really, just small topic. We're just narrowly focused on. Yeah, we're not going to go for a broad.
We're not going for anything major. Just explaining the entire universe and God and everything. Fine.
Yeah, why not?
Real easy, light reading.
Right.
Yeah.
Almost children's reading.
No one's ever questioned these things. God, science. No one ever questions these things.
Yeah, those are things nobody ever questions, and these guys they were on the forefront of it.
Very, very concrete, linear type topic.
Frontier of this stuff, yeah.
And what's even better for them is it was very easy to write from their point of view because somebody else wrote it. Astronomy professor in Virginia, he sued them, which I think was an appropriate response. And
there's a ton of lawsuits involved with these guys.
Yeah, there's all
there's
the
a
time.
ton of them, and this is only one of the first where it's aimed at them.
Yeah, this one they settled out of court. I don't think there was any disclosure, but I'm assuming that the money flowed from the twins to the professor, but we don't know.
Right.
Maybe he just wanted them to admit they were wrong or something. So then they went, just 2 years later, they started pursuing PhDs. One in Grichka, I think, pursued mathematics, and Igor, theoretical physics.
Both from the University of Burgundy
in
Dijon, France.
Yeah, and they did get the lowest passing grade. I forget what that was.
Honorable.
Honorable.
It was honorable.
Yeah.
I will say, when it comes to college stuff, the lowest passing grade is still a passing grade. As they say, C's get degrees. And when you're out in the field, I've told many clients this who are struggling with college and grades and things. I'm like, when you get out there in the real world and you're applying for jobs, nobody's going to ask you, well, what was your GPA? Like, what did you get? Did you get any C's in like, that's not in the interview process. Like, yes, HR may ask for a transcript, but what they just want to do is make sure you actually were conferred a degree. They're not looking at your GPA. They're looking at, yes, they were conferred a degree.
Yeah. GPAs only matter to keep increasing your education, right? So if you pop out your bachelor's program with like a 1.7 or whatever, or 2.1, I think anything over a 2 is generally considered, you get the degree. Maybe lower, maybe in the ones, I don't know. But, a master's program is going to bark about that. Not all of them, but some of them might say, we're looking more for like a 2.5 or 3 GPA. 3.0 is a popular, not like a hard floor, but just if you have a 3.0 or better, no one's really going to look twice. The 2 to 3 range, it gets a little squirrely, but employers don't care.
Well, having both of us been involved in the interview process for grad programs, we've been there. I've read through some of the files and things, seen the GPAs of people and been like, why are you applying here? Like, this is, like, are you sure?
Yeah, it's more like, some people get their bachelor's degree and just think employment, and then they change their mind later and go for the master's, and then they realize, oh, you mean they do look at the GPA for that?
Like, somebody's got a 1.8 GPA and a, civil engineering degree, and they're applying to a counseling program? That's a little odd. I mean, there's more than just that's considered, though. So, I mean,
right, there's a lot of factors.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. I mean, from reading the recommendation letters from people, and that can have a big impact and be like, okay, yeah, let's interview this person. But yeah, that's the only thing that GPA and the grade level really has an impact on.
Yeah, and honorable sounds good. I don't know what that is equivalent to. But honorable.
I don't know what's above that either.
I have no idea what's above
Extremely honorable.
More
Royalty.
honorable.
Most honorable. I don't know.
I mean, that is a nice way to say it. Like, oh, you receive an honorable grade. Like, okay, that sounds pretty good to me. I don't know any different.
I guess an A would be like beyond reproach. I don't know what to...
Maybe they should go, like, A would be nobody's going to question this. B would be like, no, it's still pretty good. And then, C...
Virtuous beyond compare.
Maybe C would be, you might want to watch yourself here. Don't tell anyone about this.
You've got a little mud on you.
Yeah.
I have no idea how the University of Burgundy actually does their grades or how it's done at other European universities. But it was the lowest passing grade, but it was still passing.
Right. I think as I have here, there's reported, and I don't know who this was, but some university person, I guess, would later imply that the brothers worked 10 years for free, which is the life of a doctoral student, right? Not necessarily 10 years, but there's a lot of free work involved. And even though they didn't accomplish anything, this is, again, not exact words, they each deserved a diploma. Just A for effort. What is that? If people criticize the culture, like everybody gets a trophy culture.
Yeah, right.
That's
Everybody gets a diploma.
Does that mean that the groundskeeper who works there for like 20 years deserves to get a PhD?
he got paid.
He got paid.
Oh, he got paid. Well, he still worked there.
So then if he
Put in the effort.
volunteer groundskeeper, he gets the degree. Okay.
Oh, right.
He gets the honorable mark.
I know. I think it's interesting that the papers, like the titles of some of these papers are just, if you break them down, ridiculous. Like, topological field theory of the initial singularity of space-time.
Yeah, they were very fascinated, it seems, with the Big Bang. I think that was the emphasis, which is a major emphasis in theoretical physics, obviously.
A lot of their stuff was about what happened before the Big Bang, which is unprovable. Just flat out unprovable.
Yeah, I think the debate would be more like in physics, the area of study would be more the first few milliseconds of the universe, of the Big Bang. Not pre-Big Bang. Yeah. It's like it's a little hard to investigate because there's no evidence available whatsoever, there.
You can't record things that didn't exist.
Yeah, it gets complicated. But these guys were very good. They were honorable. So who knows?
They were at least honorable about that.
What I find interesting is if you're just getting a degree to say you have it, which is what they were trying to do, why would you write 5 papers? They did 5 papers in a couple of years that they actually submitted and had approved by peer-reviewed journals. I don't understand. Like, why not just work on one, just to say I have it? Like maybe I don't know if they had the dissertation. I think they might call it a thesis there.
I believe they did.
But usually you can convert that into a paper. I mean, if it was good enough to be something that was used towards your degree.
Yeah, their stuff did begin a controversy in 2002. Yeah.
I've been a peer reviewer for counseling journals, and you get some really good stuff that comes in. You're like, okay. And you get some other stuff, and you just can't believe that somebody with a PhD wrote it. Mm. Like it's not even, like you don't even know where to start with the feedback. And eventually you're just like, I'm not even going to do this because it'd be like I'm writing a paper for them. Yeah. Same thing, grading student papers. I've been there, right? Where you just like, I don't have enough red ink for.
I've been there too.
Right. I can't even get through the first page. Like, this isn't even, I don't even understand what you're doing with the words. Like, I don't even get where we're going.
Is this English that you're writing in? Because I don't understand any of it. And I speak English. I read English very well. Sometimes student paper is submitted and it's like, are those English words? I'm not sure.
Yeah. There's the professors that you had inevitably that like, they would really mark up your papers a lot. And you get it back and be like, wow, okay, that's a lot of feedback. And then there's the ones that, like, you're lucky if you get a sentence. It's feedback.
A happy face.
Yeah, you might get, like, a bad grade or something. They're like, needs improvement. You're like, on what? Tell me something here, right? So it is what responsibility does the teacher or professor have to give some kind of feedback or say anything for that matter? But, of course, from the perspective of the teacher or professor, you run into, like, before long, you start to think, I'm pretty much just rewriting this paper, and I gotta stop doing this a little bit.
When I teach undergrad classes, it depends on the class. If it's one of the research methods classes, I have a lot of leeway and a lot of feedback on how they're on writing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if it's like the capstone class, if it's and it's supposed to be like a formal paper that they're working on, and the whole class is based on producing this final paper, I'm not giving quite as much feedback as far as the grammar stuff goes.
Sure.
Like I'll be like, okay, well, you need to reconsider this point and this point, but not as much of the, you need to rewrite this sentence because there's a lot of grammar issues. And sometimes I just get like the grammar and just be like, I'm broken. I can't read this. What is this? And I send them back and be like, go back to the drawing board on this one.
I think, over the last few years, what I've seen in academia, and this is not specific to any institution, but just overall, what I've noticed, is that like in the 50s and 60s, before I was born, a degree was a big deal. And universities were very much like, you're lucky to be here, right? You get into a university, it was a big thing. In a small town, maybe 5 or 10 people will go to university. Like it wasn't for everybody. It's still not for everybody. It's still not for most people, actually.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But back in that era, even like 40s and before, but mostly I'm talking about the 50s and 60s, there was the expectation that only people pursuing like a professional career would worry, would even bother with all the work to get in and stay in to college. And then in, I think, the 70s, with the hippies and the party culture, colleges became more a place where you went for fun and learning.
The 80s is when it kind of became an expectation.
Right. And then at some point it became customer service. Right? Yeah, it was just like, no, as a student, I'm the customer. And I'm going here and, just a big vending machine. So I shove the quarters in and I pick, whatever, hit the button. And that drop, Twix, a Kit Kat, whatever, it comes down, except it's a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that trend has only magnified with the online. I think online is good, but I think one of the downsides, there's no way to evaluate a student like in person.
Yeah.
It's all metrics. It's all GPA and letters of recommendation. There's no you can't sit with them and be like, are you really appropriate for this field?
Right.
All gatekeeping. So I'm saying it's all gone in most universities. And I think the ones that still hang on to the idea that, we're special and you need to earn being here, they're under increasing financial pressure to switch to a customer service model. But a lot of them make their money through research, so they're still somewhat insulated.
It depends on the level of the university and how desirable it is to go there.
Yeah, Ivy League, I think they're safe.
Ivy League are pretty safe at having their gatekeep. They have got their gatekeeping pretty well established.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you've got to jump through a lot of hoops to get into some of those schools. But
although there is some nepotism problems,
there's a huge
and still,
and not just the nepotism problems, the donation problems.
Oh yeah,
it's like, oh, you want to get in? Well, we could use a new library wing.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that'll get your kid in, but
but it'll help.
But it wouldn't hurt.
Wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Of course, then there's also like Lori Loughlin and the whole thing with the bribes, like actual bribes, like paying $15,000 and saying, oh yeah, they're on the sports team. Like,
I find it interesting that if you look at those bribes, they were targeted to schools that I'm not talking about. They're targeted to the ones that did have standards.
Right.
So as that number decreases, and it has drastically decreased, you have increasing pressure to get into the good schools. Mm-hmm. So people think of them as the good schools, but also there's a customer service mentality. So, like, these are opposing forces. Like, I guess what I'm saying is we should have protected universities to where it meant something to get a degree from any of them.
Mm-hmm. There also is an increased need, especially in the United States at least, there's an increased need for higher levels of education for many industries. And a lot of complaints back in the 70s and 80s were that, manufacturing plants were going over to using robots. Well, where are the jobs going to be? They're taking robots are taking our jobs. Well, the jobs became programming the robots and doing maintenance on the robots, which meant you higher, education, more education to get to that point. And the same is true now. A lot of the technology we have, computer programming, it requires a lot of education in that. And, college is more essential for many industries today than it was in the 50s and 60s. But it does open up the door. And culturally, and throughout the 80s and 90s, we saw, like, especially in movies, like every movie with teenagers was about, how are you preparing to go to college? Like, it was just the expectation that people are going to go to college right out of high school.
Wasn't there a famous movie where the kids are trying to
There's many famous movies.
But there's one in particular where they're making like a road trip to get an application in time to a college. I don't know what it was a famous movie in that genre though.
There was a movie called Road Trip, but that wasn't. They were kids were already in college at that point.
This one was like, I think it was like a boy and a girl, like a love interest, where like they were trying to get into the same college, and they were late with their application or trying to get in on time.
Yeah,
it was
something. I remember something.
I want to say 80s, but yeah, maybe it'll come to me, but I doubt it.
Somebody will comment in the comments and remind us, and
they'll know.
Let us know.
Somebody
they'll
out there will know.
I didn't give a great description, but it should be enough.
Somebody will know.
No, but I remember that premise in a movie. But it became one of those coming of age movies. Like the road trip changes them.
So at the same time that like college became an expectation, and it kind of feels like the pendulum is shifting a little bit back the other way, where it's like, no, wait a minute, we also need people that don't have degrees to do jobs that might still be well paying, but just don't need a degree, maybe a certificate or maybe even something else.
There's still a level of education that's needed, and whether it's college degree or going to a trade school. There's still a level of education beyond typical high school that is needed for those things. I mean, I'm a big proponent of education. I think that everybody should get a level of education that is appropriate for them, and that they should be, people should be open to learning.
It's a shift though from that, like, you've got to go to a traditional school and you've got to 4 years and you'll get a degree. To maybe it only takes 6 months and you'll get a certificate, and maybe that certificate will help you to do something and build skills, and you can get certificates after that and build up training and things like that. Maybe it's a trade or something, but my wife works at Del Tech, the community college around us, and she works in the workforce development department. And some of the big banks, a lot of banks in Wilmington, they fund some of these programs to get like coding certificates and things that don't require a 4-year degree, but might just be 6 months or so, but is very valuable to these big companies that are based largely on technology. So it's an interesting thing that like those avenues are available, but when you think of post high school, you're right. I mean, you think of, well, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to have some fun, and I'm going to whatever. As opposed to, maybe I don't have to do it that way. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more non-traditional, but maybe the non-traditional has to be a little bit more accepted than what it currently is.
Yeah, I think the big difference, kind of looking at the years, is that college used to be about philosophy and changing who you were to make you a leader. It wasn't really overly about what you were learning. The degree meant something. A bachelor's degree meant something. If you went into like a company, the people running it would have bachelor's degrees. Didn't matter what it was in. Now, employers are demanding that universities actually teach something that's useful specifically to a task in their company, rather than, they don't really want leaders because people know what leadership is anymore. That's lost as an art and a science. It's more about, can you perform this task? And with technological demands, like you're talking about the robots, the programming, you have you don't need to be well-rounded to do that. You don't need to have a philosophical background for that. You can learn how to code and code. And I think that type of trade education is becoming increasingly in demand. So what college used to be, I think that's gone largely. I think it's shifted. And because everything became customer service and all that, the bachelor's degree used to be the gold standard, even though, of course, there were masters and PhDs. But now, to be recognized, you have to go further. You have to have a master's in some fields to be respected. So to speak, all of them win respect, but to be at the top level respect, you have to move up. And you didn't need that years ago. Master's was like a very specialized, kind of unusual degree. Now it's commonplace.
To a point, it still is specialized. I mean, the percentage of people who get bachelor's degrees that go on to get masters is still relatively small.
I think it's 7% of the population will go on and get a master's. And I don't know what it is for bachelor's. It's gone up. I think it was around 30 or 35. I think it's gone up quite a bit. And PhD is steady around 1%. It's always been 1%.
The one percenters. I would say most people with PhDs are not in that 1%.
No.
There are a few, but by and large, it's a research-oriented.
Well, so to my point here, like the bachelor's used to get you a good job. Now more people are getting pressure to get the master's. But a PhD was always research. The PhD should never be a degree that somebody gets just because they feel like they want one. Mm-hmm. Like it has to be a little bit more than that. It's a lifetime commitment to creating knowledge and applying knowledge at the highest level. And here, we see these brothers. It was more just like, oh, I want it because people are making fun of me.
I need to prove something about myself.
Yeah, they could have got a bachelor's or a master's and I think that would have been perfect for them. Mm-hmm. You get on a show and you're like, look, I don't have a PhD or whatever, but I have this bachelor's or master's in physics.
Or even better, they get multiple master's degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That takes even less time. And you get multiple master's degrees. Like, I may not have a PhD, but I've got 7 master's degrees in different sciences. And people are going to be like, that's an educated man right there. And, but a PhD is the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's the pinnacle. Like you get that doctor put in front of you.
Yeah,
you get that if you become a physician too. But
yes, yeah. They're also called doctors. Yeah. It's highly confusing. I think we've talked about that before, how the origins of that. But it's just, it's one of those things that originally it was for
teachers,
PhDs. Yeah, well, now would be the PhD, and then the practitioners, medical practitioners, as a courtesy, were extended that title.
Thanks, Edinburgh.
And yeah, now it's everybody. Everybody with any type of doctoral degree, no matter what it's in, calls themselves a doctor.
Yeah. If we haven't covered it on the show before, the University of Edinburgh is responsible for physicians using the term doctor because they were the ones doing most research in medicine, early days of medicine. And if you were teaching there in medicine, you were highly prized for your skills elsewhere. So when they would leave their post at University of Edinburgh and go down like to London or something and claim that they were a doctor at University of Edinburgh, people would really take notice and want their skills. So other people started trying to leverage that. They'd go up there, teach one class, and then come back, say, I'm a doctor. And it became this desirable thing for the medical profession for people to do that. And then some of them just started calling themselves doctor without ever having done that.
Well, medical degrees are certainly very important to society. I think a special name is warranted, but why pick the same one that was already used for something else? It's funny because now sometimes people will say, well, the real doctors are MDs. Not if you open a history book.
I mean, that is a joke that was on The Simpsons.
Right.
At one point. Yeah. Is there a doctor in the house? I have a PhD in literature. I met a real doctor.
Yeah, the word has come to mean something that it did not originally mean.
Yeah.
So now it's split.
Synonymous with physician these days.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, when it should not be. It has really very little to do with that. But we're stuck with that. But either way, I think that for whatever reason, that appeals to people, the idea of being called a doctor, like with a PhD or an MD. And I think that's what drove these twins to do that. I don't think they really, well, I know, pretty sure they didn't know much about physics and mathematics, not enough to operate at that level. Right. Now, once you get published, people generally figure that you're in the field and you're all good. But some physicists started actually reading their articles. Just, I guess, maybe they're interested in the topic.
Max Niedermeyer from University of Pittsburgh was one of the first ones to bring it up. Yeah.
If only somebody hadn't read it.
Right. If nobody had read their papers ever, and I'm pretty sure that their PhD panel didn't really read it either. But
no.
Yeah, Max Niedermeyer said that when he read their papers, they were, quote, spoofs created by throwing together instances of theoretical physics jargon, including terminology from string theory. And said the abstracts are delightfully meaningless combinations of buzzwords, which apparently have been taken seriously.
Yeah, well, I think if you're really busy and you're a peer reviewer and you see like quantum physics, string theory, whatever other words, dark matter, you throw dark matter in there a few times, you're like, you know what, I'm kind of tired, so this looks good.
Got all the right words. I don't care what order they're in. Yeah, all right.
So other physicists were also fairly unkind in their description of the papers. I guess it was some type of online board that this just cut loose in. And it was called the Bogdanoff Affair.
Yeah.
So some of the things they said, I think this is cool. You mentioned the one. Let's see, I have a few other things that... their writing lacked coherence. It was nonsensical and meaningless, fell short of scientific standards. It contained no meaningful content and could in no way be considered a scientific contribution. It was hollow, but dressed with sophistication. This is my favorite. They were the scientific version of the Kardashian family.
I hadn't heard that one. That's so funny.
There's some irony there, too, that even what they wrote was fake. I mean, of course, maybe not that. I don't know what their faces looked like at that time. Probably different than what they naturally would look like. But it kind of kept with that theme of things being unnatural, not, fake and not really...
Artificially inflated.
Artificially inflated. Not really what they appeared to be. Yeah.
Much like the Kardashians.
Was it like a competition to see I don't know if the Kardashians have Botox or whatever, but
I'm pretty sure. They might deny it, but I'm pretty sure it could be the same. Same can be said for the Bogdanoffs.
Seems like a reasonable speculation, right?
Yeah, right.
I do want to give some props to the Kardashians, though. They've used some of their fame and their wealth to actually help others and do charitable things. But just the way they have been presented for so long has just been this kind of vapid, vacant, fake dressing that it becomes an apt analogy for the scientific nature of the Bogdanoff's paper.
I think the Kardashians were the first who became famous for being famous, right? Like people that had no measurable skill, who were like megastars. Mm-hmm. Like why are we mentioning them? We can't stop talking about them. Right. I think that's what their contribution was. I believe that the father of the Kardashians is a famous attorney. He was one of the O.J. Simpson attorneys.
He was one of the Simpson attorneys.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's...
I don't know. I can't hear about the Kardashians without thinking about Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, and the Kardashians. I always think of them every time. I'm a huge dork. I admit that, and I own it. Keeping up with the Kardashians.
That could be another Star Trek spinoff. Forget Discovery. Go with the... Although Discovery hasn't been bad.
Discovery's been really good. I really have been enjoying that one. I can't wait for Picard to come back.
I mean, I guess you have the Bogdanoff twins maybe to maybe a little bit thank for something. If it's popular in France, then maybe it's a little bit more popular in the U.S. I don't know.
Yeah, but one of the guys, Roman Jacko, who was one of the people on the panel that approved Igor Bogdanoff's thesis, even came back later after rereading it and said, I gave a favorable opinion to this defense based on a rapid and indulgent reading of the thesis text. Alas, I was completely mistaken. The scientific language was just an appearance behind which hid incompetence and ignorance of even basic physics.
I think probably a fair evaluation.
Yeah. See, and that's a guy that did something and then had the brains enough to be like, no, wait, I gotta step back. I can't double down on this. I gotta step back and admit my faults, admit that I was wrong. Bogdanoff twins could have done that too. And okay, yeah, you're right. We were wrong. This was stupid. Whatever. And backtrack.
They could have played it, and this is what people thought they were doing, into a critique,
right.
of the
of the system,
similar to my criticisms of university systems, where in a sense they're becoming phony, or at least not what they used to be. Right. In terms, they're not really gatekeepers.
A critique of the peer review system.
I think they could have really. I mean, they could have got some mileage out of that.
Yeah, they could have laid into that. Yeah.
One of my favorite comics of all time is just a single panel comic. It has a bunch of guys in lab coats on either side of a road, and they're all holding like different implements of destruction, like chainsaws and maces and swords and things. At the very end, it says peer review. And And the tag underneath is like, many scientists find the peer review process to have been streamlined. It's like, if you can get through this, and sometimes it's less painful to do it that way than it would be to go through the actual peer review process.
Well, another thing about peer review that I've noticed, and with journals, is some journals, for some PhDs, journals are important because that's like the research route. You have to keep publishing. Some journals pretty much will publish anything. They'll even send you emails and say, please submit an article. Others have standards, and those are the ones that everybody wants to get in, right? So again, it comes down to standards are good.
Yeah, some of those journals just want to have. We need something to put here. So here, hey Tim, read this. Is it good? Yeah, I can read it. Okay, good. We'll publish it.
It has complete sentences. Sounds wonderful.
Does it have periods? Yes. Good.
Sometimes. Okay.
Publish
Yeah,
it. Good. Wait. Really important question. Is there one space or two after the periods? I don't know. I can't tell. Like, whatever. Publish it anyway.
I mean, getting content out like that is the name of the game for many websites, for many things. Like if you do a search and you want your thing to be the first hit, whatever your website is. So just getting content out there is a very important thing to be able to get paid and make the most money out of whatever topic you're about. But obviously that's the way that some do it. But obviously with journals, it's not the goal to just get content out there just for the sake of getting it out there.
Shouldn't be.
Right.
Sometimes it is.
Right.
Yeah.
But, obviously quality should be take precedent over just getting something out there.
Oh, some of those journals are the worst. You apply your paper, and they're like, okay, we'll send it to peer review. They send it to a peer reviewer who reviews it and says, I don't like the way this sentence is. Go make them change it. And they send it back, and so you make the change. You send it back to the publication. They send it out to another peer reviewer who's like, no, I don't like this. Make them change it. And you go through this 12 times, and then the last one goes, I don't like the way this is. Change it to something else. And it's the change you made from the first guy. Mm-hmm. And you got it back, but you have to make the change, and you change it back to what it originally was, and you get to another peer reviewer who's like, it's perfect. But you go through all of these steps, these nitpicky steps, and sometimes it's all about the grammar.
Yeah, and your paper's locked up because you're not allowed ethically to submit it to more than one. Yeah. So that's really, I think, the one of the big downsides is 6-7 months or more, it's held hostage, and you have no idea if they're going to accept it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, research professors, they get raises and stuff based on publications because in theory, if you have a large research agenda, you attract grant money. That's the name of the game, right? So, there's even journals where you can pay them to get published. Like they're like, give us $300 and we'll give you a special peer review.
We're not saying it's a self-published article, but, if you donate $300.
It kind of, they still do peer reviews, but it's more like, they tell people what they can fix as opposed to like rejecting it because they want the money.
And some of them, like their peer-reviewed journals, they submit a certain number of their articles, like their cover articles for peer review, and then they have a section where it's not peer-reviewed. And they'll publish anything in those. But then those publications can sometimes get marked online with from peer-reviewed journal. Mm-hmm. Even though that article is not peer-reviewed itself, it was published in an article in a journal that tends to be peer-reviewed or has peer review. And that can be confusing, especially for students who don't know the difference in what they're looking for.
Well, it makes information literacy even more important, like to teach students how to find what's actually peer-reviewed. And peer-reviewed might be the gold standard, but it's not perfect either. It's really about, going and finding repeated findings and comparing them. Yeah. Right.
Which unfortunately is a problem these days because there's a lot of big issue, especially in the U.S., with repeatability studies. Like, it's great to be the first person to figure something out or find something. It's not as great and earth-shattering to be the 50th person to find that same thing.
Yeah, I verify this is true.
Yeah, but the 50th one is really where we can say, yeah, it's true. Mm. The first one, that could be a fluke.
Yeah, and we've seen that many times. Single, one-hit wonders that go out there and they're totally, it's nonsense.
Yeah, so we want repeats of experiments and to do it over and over and over again, but unfortunately, that's not where the fame is. It's not where the glory is. So we don't see it as much, but that's what we need.
If I'm not mistaken, I can't remember his name, but there's a famous researcher who discovered Titanic. Very famous guy. I want to say Ballard. I want to say his name was Ballard, last name. But I remember one time he was giving an interview and he said that research is a team sport. And basically, he was talking about how people were mad at him, for kind of like he became famous when normally researchers don't. But he happened to find, one of the greatest underwater discoveries that has ever been.
Yeah, Robert Ballard.
Robert Ballard, yeah. I think he had some actor. I think it was Bill Paxton. Was it Bill Paxton that played him on the movie Titanic? I don't remember. There was an actor that played. I thought it was supposed to be like Ballard or somebody like Ballard.
You're getting a nod, yes.
Bill Paxton. Okay, I think I like Bill Paxton. He was in Aliens.
Game over, man. Game over.
He was a great actor.
He was one of the few killed by an alien, a Terminator, and a Predator. He's one of like 3 actors to hold that particular honor.
Yeah.
This the idea of the first person to find something or have some kind of finding is always important, but right now too with COVID and just a lot of unknowns with it, there's been a lot of I think maybe stories like that. First person to have some kind of finding have maybe come into a bit more prominence because if it might say early findings show that such and such has an effect on this. So like I was reading something today about long COVID, or people that have long-term symptoms from COVID, and something about a study with 200 people and finding like indicators that things that might indicate, better odds of having long COVID, having, long-term symptoms. And it pretty much said, here's some things that we think, here's some things that we saw in this preliminary data, but we don't know, more studies needed. And maybe that gives some people some hope in some sense, like if maybe I'm at a greater risk for this, and maybe this study helps kind of show that, and then that maybe helps me to understand what might be happening for me, something like that. So maybe it gives a little bit of something, but of course it doesn't really mean anything either because it's just one study so far, and they'll freely say a lot more research is needed. So it seems like a double-edged sword in that regard because it's meaningful, but it doesn't really have much impact yet either because we're not really sure if it's true. It's still the first study. There's got to be a lot more work to be done, but that takes time, and that's going to take a lot of time just to repeat that and to really see some patterns. So it's an unfortunate thing that, of course, it's going to take a long time. Studies do, but at the same time, hopefully, it can help someone to just begin to, especially those in the medical community, to begin to understand things a bit better.
Brock Lovett, by the way, was the name of the character Bill Paxton played in Titanic.
Okay. I think he was, maybe he was modeled off of Ballard or he was supposed to be the leader of the expedition. Mm-hmm. And he stumbled across the ship, and then that's when Rose, I think, flew out or had contacted them, and she was the one. Kate Winslet played her in the flashback to. It's an old movie. It was very popular when I was young.
It was an incredibly popular movie.
Yeah,
people were going to see that movie like 12 and 13 times. It was in the theater. Like it had an incredibly long run.
Kind of the Star Wars effect, right? Where people started watching more than once, seeing the same movie more than once. All right, so
I don't know. I knew it was going to end before it was released.
It wasn't a surprise.
It wasn't a surprise when the ship went down.
No spoiler alert needed for that movie. So the Bogdanoff brothers were very embarrassed when all these people started saying, look, you're basically frauds and your PhDs aren't real. And they went on a lawsuit expedition. They got knocked down pretty hard a few times. They had one pretty minor victory, only to be slammed later, and then they gave up filing lawsuits. I get the impression it was frivolous. They were just mad.
Yeah. They sued one magazine for defamation and lost because they missed their court deadlines, and then they were ordered to pay the magazine's legal costs, 2,500 euros.
I think there's another one where they when they won they had to pay like €1.
That was actually not a lawsuit. It was a criminal case. Actually, they had filed a criminal case against a scientist who had posted It was a criminal complaint of copyright.
Copyright, right?
Because the scientist had posted an unpublished version of their paper of one of the papers on his personal website. If he'd printed one of the ones that had been actually published in a journal, it wouldn't have been an issue. But it was an unpublished version, one of the earlier drafts, and he put it up on his website, and they're like, "That's copyright. That's copyright infringement because that's our work, and we didn't publish it." So the courts found against him, gave him a fine of $2,000 and €2,000 for the court costs of breaking that particular law, but then €1 of damages to the Bogdanoffs.
Yeah, sends a pretty clear message that you're wasting our time.
Right.
Yeah.
And the decision of the court was that the scientist had lacked prudence given the fame of the plaintiff.
Yeah, I think French law is a little different than what would happen here with that. Public figures get less protection in the United States, but not necessarily on copyright, but just in general. So starting in 2010, this kind of takes us to the last phase of this. There's some very, we'll just say subtle or not so subtle, but to be polite, subtle changes in facial features for the brothers. They looked pretty normal before. Yet after, there was some expansion.
After, they kind of looked like the dad from Encanto. if you've seen that movie, like it's rage right now. All the rage on Disney Plus. It's a good movie. I really liked it. But they're like. Yeah, almost like it got stung by a bee and just faces went.
And it just stayed there.
And then stayed there, yeah.
Yeah, cheekbones, chins, and lips all markedly increased in size. And of course, as you mentioned, they denied implants, Botox, or any surgical procedure, which I just find impossible to believe. I don't know how else to put it. Right. I just don't believe them. I guess aliens could have come down and hit them with a face ray or whatever, but it seems very clear they were lying.
That's the unnamed technology.
There you go. I don't want to talk about the aliens, but they were there.
It's like we like being, confused for aliens. We really enjoy that.
Yeah, so this went on for many years, and I can't remember which one is which, but one of these guys, his eyes were like barely visible. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about the compression of whatever was going on in the forehead, I think it was mostly the cheeks, right? Were just coming up. It was almost like a slit in a tank.
Yeah, right.
It's just like, what? How are you? It's like a sun visor. The Arctic sun visors that have the thing. It's kind of what it. Yeah.
I did read on one site when I was doing research for these that there was at least one person or group of people speculating that it was actually a genetic disorder that caused just this unchecked growth of cartilage material underneath the skin that just made it continue. And they both had it because they were genetically almost identical, so that it just continued. I don't know if that's true or not.
I've never seen.
Can't say.
I've never seen that in anyone else. Like I've never seen anyone. There might be some rare diseases that cause some disfigurement like that. Stung by a bee, maybe, like if you're allergic. But would it happen uniformly? I don't think the bees. Like, I stung you on the one side.
Let's get somebody
symmetry.
Let's make sure we got another bee to sting you on the other side to make sure it stays symmetrical.
I would think that like sleeping would be uncomfortable. Like if they slept face down, like in the pillow, whatever. Like I would think that would get really miserable.
Anything other than just on their back, because if you're on your side, maybe it's hitting the cheek. But I don't know.
Yeah. I don't get the desire for that. That again kind of seemed like a departure from their look, which was to try to look better. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was supposed to look better.
I imagine that at some point, once you start something, and then maybe realize, maybe this wasn't what I want. Maybe it's, depending on what they did, maybe it's difficult or impossible to go back from that.
I don't know. I guess I'm confused. Like, what were they trying to achieve? Because it started off like pronounced, but still modest compared to where it ended up. So did they look at that in the mirror and they're like, more of this? I would think they would be like, no, definitely go back to where we were.
Right.
This is terrible. This is not working.
Can we take us back a little bit? Just a little bit. Just
Step back.
Just bring it back. We're on the edge. Bring it back.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if this didn't involve some type of delusion that they were sharing, where they looked in the mirror and they believed that this was attractive. Almost like a body dysmorphia.
I was just about to say, that maybe they were so fixated on it that they would do anything to make themselves look better or something, any kind of. But, you would think that you would have seen something like that prior to that point, some kind of behavior or something where they would have noticed long before that they would have been so focused on their appearance, and I don't know, but maybe it came with age and that started to become more prominent in their mind. I don't know, but I mean, obviously we don't know for sure, but they don't seem to be showing, they didn't seem to be showing any kind of signs or symptoms or anything that would lead to that.
They didn't have other delusional behavior.
Right.
It seemed to be focused on their appearance only. Mm-hmm. They were still functioning. They were still doing projects. I think they were trying to bring back one of their early sci-fi shows.
Yeah. I think it's important to look at their background, their family background, that they were raised by their grandmother who had been nobility, royalty. Like she was married to a prince, and then she had four kids with the prince, and would have inherited like titles and things, but she ended up having an affair, and with an American musician, and ended up getting pregnant by him, and then got ostracized, lost everything, and then she ended up being her daughter was the twins' mother, but she ended up raising them. So this woman who's been ostracized from the community very much would have been, and seems likely that she would have been very, very into like the appearance of the social appearance in society. Not necessarily a physical appearance, but that also would have been an aspect of it. Right. But she would have instilled that into them, having them grow up with her.
That's a good point. That's possible.
So they would have been growing up with that mentality of like, we have to show that we are the best, and that we can't let weakness show through, or we can't let any kind of flaw be visible. So if they develop a flaw, they lean into, this isn't really a flaw, you're just wrong.
Right.
So holding on to that mentality, something they start going wrong with their faces. They're twins, so they've got to try and stay looking the same. If one of them, it's possible, if one of them had gotten some sort of genetic disorder that just started causing cartilage to build up in their face, the other one would have gotten implants to try and stay looking the same, so they could stay as similar as possible.
Well, they were a package deal. Like their careers were tied together.
Right.
So that maybe something happened. Maybe it was an injury. Yeah, it was just something happened where they're like, we need to both change to stay the same. Because one's now different, the other one has to match it, and we'll just take it to an extreme. I don't know. Also occurred to me that they were like essentially actors, hosts on TV show, kind of like actors, like public personalities, TV personalities, and they might have viewed that there's like a shelf life to that. It's based on appearance.
Right.
They probably would have been fine aging and continuing to do that, but they might have got like self-conscious and thought we need to make a bold move to try to stay young, and then it was a horrible, horrible outcome. I
mean, that lines up with everything they did before, though, too. Bad decision, and let me just lean into it. Let me go with it. Let me double down on it, and I'm just going to keep doing that. every time I make a bad decision, I'm just going to keep going with it and not just admit, all right, I got to just accept what I did or where I'm at or whatever. Could have just accepted, you know what? I'm getting older and it's inevitable that I'm going to look different. Okay, I'm just going to accept that. Just lean into that. Go with it. Okay, it is what it is. As opposed to, no, I really got to make a bold move. I really got to change something about this. You could have made a lot of changes here just by not doing anything. Just by letting it go and just, but they seem to be all about that recognition and importance and being the best or being viewed as the best anyway. It's very unfortunate unfolding of events for them.
Yeah, this was a tragedy.
Doubling down. I think it's surprising how often the doubling down mentality can be effective for celebrities.
Yeah.
When people get a certain amount of fame, they can just double down on anything and just bullhead their way through. Mm-hmm. Like other people who aren't celebrities, if they try and double down on something, they'll get called out on it. Yeah. And sometimes just stopped right dead in their tracks with, no, you're done with that. Other people, the Bogdanoffs, so they just kept doubling down. Certain other political and famous people have done that as well. I think we had 4 years of that happening.
Yeah.
Recently, just every day, double down on something. Double down.
No conceding, acknowledging.
And some of the stuff is just so silly to not concede. Right. It was a typo. Okay, sure, I'm moving on. But no, I got to be perfect. So Covfefe is now those people who need to know what Covfefe is know what Covfefe is.
I'm not wrong. You're wrong.
It was a typo of coverage. I mean, you can read that from context in the tweet, but double down. And Trump wasn't the only person who's ever done that. I mean, there are a lot of other celebrities who do the same thing. And celebrities seem to be able to get away with it. If I scream loudly enough and double down on this enough, people will accept it. Mm.
And maybe there's a handbook for it somewhere.
I don't know. Maybe if you get to a certain level of celebrity status, they just hand you the handbook.
Somebody appears.
Double down.
Check this out. Check it out. It's going to make you more famous. Check it out.
This is the secret double down handbook. Maybe we'll get that handbook someday.
Never know. Yeah, so there's no reverse gear. They press forward, and I think that even in the theme stays true, right? Even in their final moments, it was about arrogance and misinterpreting and misunderstanding science. All the worst things they had done, they brought them all together for one final party. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was the final party.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a non-survivable event there with COVID. So yeah, it also sticks with the theme of doing things together.
Right.
Yeah. Theme.
I believe that, who was it that died first? Was it Grichka?
Yes.
Grichka. Yeah, Grichka. And Igor was born first. He was born 40 minutes before Grichka, and then he survived 6 days afterwards. So
I believe that what I read was that Grichka, when he died, Igor was already in really bad shape, so he never knew. They went into unconsciousness approximately the same time, and never were not aware that the other one was in peril. Yeah,
which some people will point to the supernatural ability of twins to just know things about their twin and just go with it. And completely coincidence.
Yeah,
they were both 72 years old. And caught COVID. Odds of survival of that become very low.
Well, I mean, it should.
They're at risk. They're at risk.
Yeah, they're at risk, but technically they should have survived. Statistically, should have. But without the vaccine, they had no protection, and it's dangerous. Certainly, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it's dangerous to get COVID, but most times it's not fatal. Not most times. So the fact that they both died of the same illness near the same time, it's a coincidence. Yes.
Being twins, they likely had very similar health issues.
Right. And whenever COVID has some people are more vulnerable based on genetics. Mm-hmm. So if one of them was unlucky,
right,
the other one was too. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very sad. I don't know much about the meme thing. That's an area I didn't really look into when I first did this video, and I've come to understand there are many memes with the cryptocurrency.
There are a lot of the memes with cryptocurrency, and they leaned into it. I think it was because of a lot of their background with nobility and the aristocracy and their scientific background that they supposedly had. Like, they were seen as being like very intelligent, and then like being able to control things. Like it started on like some message boards in the background, and people were just like really kind of making fun of them. That's where it kind of became the meme. It's like, well, what are these guys all about? It's like, oh yeah, they control everything. Like, they're like, oh, they're better than the Rothschilds. Like they're up there. They're in the Illuminati. Like, they are the alien lizards. Like, did you see the face? It's alien lizard stuff. Like, that's kind of where the visual memes came out of, was that kind of like everybody piling fake facts on top of fake facts about them. But then they started leaning into it. And it was like, they got tied into cryptocurrency and like the whole dump it. Oh, that's doing well? Dump it. Just because the idea that they can make world and earth-shattering decisions with just a phone call and a snap of the fingers and then destroy it. And they leaned into it. They thought it was funny. But I think it started kind of along the lines of the Chuck Norris tropes.
Mm-hmm. Right, that he's invincible and super warrior, and yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Chuck Norris's tears could cure cancer. Too bad Chuck Norris has never cried.
I still love them. I mean,
I love some of them too. My favorite is the one that he actually chose to put in the Expendables 2, or was it 3? Whichever one he was in.
Right.
It was like Chuck Norris was once bitten by a snake, and after 3 days of terrifying, horrible pain, the snake finally died.
Gotta embrace that, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, can't fight that stuff. You just gotta embrace it. And
Chuck Norris did. Like, he embraced all those. He loved those.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, you can get really upset by them.
Sure. Right.
Or you can just be like, that's funny.
Yeah. I mean, why fight against it? It's not going to stop. Actually, it's probably going to increase more if you fight against it. Mm-hmm. Embrace it.
Yeah, well, that's what we see here too with the Bogdanoffs. One other note with them I thought was interesting. Their name ends in the letters OFF, but they preferred to put OV. It's not technically correct. So I think it's pretty much the same pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a linguistic difference. Like, when you're translating from one language to another.
Right, maybe a little, yeah. Yeah, just kind of another, like, maybe vanity item.
Right.
I don't know what the advantage of OV would be over OFF, but
maybe in their minds it was more correct to the origin or something, and therefore, let me come out on top, let me look better, let me appear to be better, something. Maybe vanity, like you said.
They could have changed it.
They could have. It could be one, French spelling versus German spelling, and they prefer the German.
Right, it could have been something like that.
So, hey, we prefer German because we more identify with German, but this is the French spelling, and it goes everywhere. And I don't know the particulars behind that particular decision, but that one's one of those less important ones. It was important to them because it's their name; they get to choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want with their name. Like, it's your name. You get to set and tell everybody else what your name is and how you spell it. I was just having a conversation with my fiance the other day. She told me that I should, I was thinking about changing my middle name to start with a V. And she's like, oh, you should change your last name to start with a P, but the P is silent. Just so that my initials would be MVP. I'm like, I'm not doing that. It's funny, but I'm not doing it. But you could, and I respect anybody's right to do that. It's your name. You tell people how to spell it, how to pronounce it. But that's the least of the kind of weird stuff about the Bogdanoffs.
Yeah, well, it's just one more thing again that they agreed on too, right? It's like if one of them wanted that, but they came as a package deal.
Yeah.
So, but
They went as a package deal too.
They did. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't remember their relationship status. I think one had a girlfriend.
One had been married a couple of times, had like 6 kids.
I think several girlfriends.
It was Igor.
Yeah, and the other one was not as involved, I guess, romantically. But other than that, I mean, they did seem to really sync up, do the same things throughout their life, same career. So
Igor had 6 children, 4 from his first marriage and 2 from his second.
okay. Yeah, so really, I mean, just a peculiar case that I think, in so many ways, again, at so many stages in their life where we see these unusual behaviors and choices. I mean, they did pack a lot of action into 72 years.
Yeah,
I'll give them that.
for sure.
Yeah.
They got a lot done. I mean, there's a lot of controversy around that.
Yeah, I think it's they made decisions that seemed unnecessary where they could have just built on their success. Sometimes you think, all right, if your career's failing, you might do something drastic, but they weren't doing badly. Mm-hmm. They hadn't lost everything. They weren't living in an alley. Right. But maybe, I don't know, a lot of factors about being famous, I guess, affect people in different ways.
I think that we have to remember as Americans that culturally Americans have been divorced from the aristocracy for 200 years. Like it's not as big a thing in our lives, but it was a major part of theirs. It was part of their history. Like their grandmother was essentially a princess. Like that's how close it is to them. And like they're trying to carry on that whole, like the whole air of that, the name, the mentality, all of it,
the self-importance,
and there's a lot of that built into that kind of is ridiculed by Americans because we don't have that. Not as officially.
I think Americans are actually split on that because
we've got the Kennedys,
right? But and we have a fascination with like the British royal family. We have a fascination with that royal structure that was introduced like in early in the United States, like before that kind of class system was completely gone. I think there's a new show on HBO that explores kind of that system in New York City in like 1880, something like that. I forget what it's called. There's only I have one episode out so far, but basically it's the same guy who wrote Downton Abbey.
Right.
Which was a big show. I mean, obviously big in Britain, but big in America. There's a fascination.
I love Downton Abbey. That was a great show.
It was a great
show.
Yeah. And The Crown on Netflix.
It was a huge soap opera. That's all it was a soap opera, but it had so much great character development.
Yeah, it was so well written.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, think about it, it's kind of a boring, like if objectively, if you just look at it quick, like, oh, that's a pretty boring topic. But they made it so interesting with the relationships and the upstairs downstairs dynamic.
Oh yeah,
it had some corny moments, but I really liked.
It did have some corny moments, but it was great.
Yeah, I liked the movie too.
But we have we do have a fascination. Americans, we do have a fascination with some of the British, like the British royal family specifically. Mm-hmm. But in general, if we talk about we don't know much about the House of Lords. Right. That's Parliament. Like it's basically they have 2 different chambers. There's the House of Lords and the House of Commons. The Commons are elected. The House of Lords are aristocracy. But you ask anybody in America if they know anything about the House of Lords, and they're like, "What? Is that like House of Cards sequel?" No, it's not.
What streaming service is that on?
Right. But so I mean, there is a point where we're looking at the British royal family, especially with Meghan Markle and I'd like to an American. So I mean, like there was a lot of looking into that. There's a lot of people who didn't care about the royal family until they heard that an American woman was becoming a princess. Like, oh my goodness, wow.
But even if you look at Princess Diana's wedding, there was a lot of people that were not British that watched that.
Yeah. It's a beautiful princess story, but nobody cares about the Duke of Westminster, the Duke of somebody out in the middle of nowhere. Like I can't even name some of the. Like, look at Worcester. Like, who's the Duke of Worcester? If there isn't even a Duke of Worcester, I'm not sure.
Well, they have so many. One person can have multiple titles.
Yeah, I know.
You can be the Duke of this and the Colonel. Prince Andrew was the Colonel of all these different things in the military.
Right.
He had like 12 titles.
And that's what that's part of my point is like, we don't know, like, because we don't really get involved in that. Like, we like the idea of aristocracy and looking at it. But for people like the Bogdanoffs, like, that was their family. That was their history. That was their birthright. They held on to that. Like, they knew all of it. Like, everyone surrounding that they might be related to was part of their life, and their personality was built into them. That's how important it becomes very often. So some of the decisions that they made were based on kind of on that, what they were raised with.
Yeah, what they expected. The status they had in society, what they expected from, as far as adoration and attention. Yeah, certainly, I mean, it'd be tough to understand their mentality completely. There's a lot of factors that just other people would not know how to process. It's just unique to them. Mm-hmm. They were unique.
They were absolutely unique.
Definitely were.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there is a fascination with royalty, and like the Kennedys, I never really saw as special. Even John F. Kennedy, youngest president, I believe, right? Only Catholic president. Right. So he's special in those two ways. But as a leader, I never saw it with John F. Kennedy. His actions and with PT 109, he caused that. And yeah, he saved them too, but he also caused that. Them to get struck by the destroyer. I just didn't see him as a hero and as special. But him and his entire family, they are royalty.
They were before he became president. That's one of the ways he became president. His dad was like one of the most wealthy Catholics in
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. So, like, hey, wow, like he's people who knew him, they knew, and kind of it trickled down. But even today, they still have like Kennedy connections, and that's kind of the American aristocracy. Now it's like the Kardashians. Again, the American aristocracy is the people who are famous, the most famous, the people who have the biggest followings, rather than people who were, gifted a vassalship through royal means. But we still pay attention to that because we notice the popularity.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there'll always be royalty, I guess. It's just a matter, is it kind of official, like sponsored by the government, like a constitutional monarchy, like United Kingdom, or someone that we get to decide through popular vote, sort of.
Right. sort of, for some people, sort of.
Right.
But when you're the only candidate for Congress for like 20 years in your state or area, is it really a choice? You get one vote, you win.
Right.
And that is true for a very few, but there are some especially ones who have been who have been in Congress or the Senate for like 50 years, 60 years. That's a problem. They run unopposed sometimes.
Yeah, or it's a foregone conclusion that there's no way someone's going to win. Mm-hmm. I think the Kennedy curse would be a good topic for a future podcast. Kind of like the Superman curse, except even more stuff.
Oh, I love the Superman curse. I'm pulling for Henry Cavill to not have anything happen to him.
What's the Superman curse? I'm not familiar.
The Superman curse is a thing where like everybody who plays Superman dies some weird, mysterious way.
Okay.
Or is severely injured. Christopher Reeves was injured on a horseback. Right. George Reeves, of course, died officially by suicide, but there are those who say it was murdered. Which we should cover George Reeves because it's a fascinating case. But then there were others who played like minor roles that had some other issues.
Okay, gotcha.
And like Dean Cain's career was almost destroyed by playing Superman,
or by his lack of acting talent. I mean, you pick. You can pick.
Yeah, some poor decisions in what he should have done and what shouldn't have done. But
so the moral of the story is don't play Superman.
Don't play Superman.
Okay.
Like
Don't play Superman. Don't be a Kennedy. Yeah.
Maybe General Zod would be a better. Is it Zod?
Zod.
Better.
COD. Zod.
Yeah. Better choice.
Michael Shannon was great as Zod. I love loved him.
Was that Superman
Crazy.
2?
That was no. That
That
was
was the more recent.
yeah. That was in Man of Steel.
I like the Superman 2 General Zod as well. I know it was cornier back then, but
Like I still don't understand the cellophane's S. Like I don't. It's like I still don't get that. Like where did that come from? Like he just pulls the S off his chest. It wraps a dude up, falls down, and then it vanishes. It's like it was never there. It's like what?
I don't know anything about Superman, but that sounds uncharacteristic.
It was totally
Sounds like
weird.
that's
Actually,
comes out
no.
of left field.
That is actually super characteristic of the Silver Age, the 50s, 60s, and 70s Superman. Like they started getting a little bit more realistic with character development in the 80s. But yeah, that was definitely 60s and 70s Superman. He had weird powers in this. The one I remember was super ventriloquism. Like he's flying through space. This is weird. Flying through space, racing the Flash. And he needs to throw his voice down to tell the Flash something on the surface. So he uses his super ventriloquism to throw his voice from space down to the planet. Like really? Come on, guys. Like if there was something at that point, if there was something that a human could do, Superman had a super version of it.
well, spoiler alert for the original Superman, but he flew backwards around, like like against the orbit of Earth. And instead of cataclysm, it ended up reversing time.
He flew so fast that he reversed the spin of the Earth and took it back in time. It was ridiculous.
And barely still fixed his problems, right?
Yeah, he could have gone back a little bit further.
Yeah, just keep winding that. How about like before Lex Luthor was born or something, right? Like think it through.
Let's go back a little bit further. Like save your dad from dying. That kind of thing. If you're gonna do it, you do it. Like, Go all the way. No,
just barely enough.
Barely enough to save Lois Lane's life. That was not a really greatly written movie.
Well, I thought the end was the disaster. The rest of it I liked.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the end was kind of cobbled together because what Richard Donner really wanted to do was take it all the way through. Like Superman and Superman 2 were supposed to be one movie, supposed to be one long movie, and he was supposed to, as he was, taking the nuke, throw it up in there, and that was supposed to break the Phantom Zone and release Zod and everything go through. But that was going to be like a 6.5 hour movie. And the producers were like, no. Figure it out.
Yeah, they could have been a little more clever than flying around the planet and changing the rotation of the Earth. But twice because he had to go backwards.
Yeah, and then he had to go forward.
He's looking at his watch. Am I getting this timing right? Am I getting the speed right here? We're going a little too fast.
Yeah, he had to kickstart it again, get it going in the right direction. But Christopher Reeve's, it was iconic when you see him pop the shirt open. It's Superman S there.
He was a great Superman.
Yeah,
he really was.
He really was. And George Reeves was such a great Superman. There's a apocryphal tale of a kid bringing a gun to a appearance where he was.
Oh, right, because he was going to shoot him.
Yeah, because the kid wanted to see the bullets bounce off of Superman's chest. The kid really believed that George Reeves was Superman, so he wanted to shoot him to see the bullet bounce off. And to George Reeves' credit, according to the story, I'm not sure if this is actually true or not, but to his credit, he just got down with the kid and got right on his level and was just like, we can't do that because if that bullet bounces off, it could hit somebody and it really hurt them. And we don't want to hurt anybody else, do we? And the kid's like, no. He's like, okay, just let me have that and we'll take care of him. He took the gun away from him, handed it off, and then got everybody to applaud for the kid and put him up on his shoulder and everything. That's got to be terrifying. Mm-hmm. But to George Reeves' credit, he really leaned into the Superman moment and went with the character. So he was a great Superman too, but there was some mystery surrounding the which is the Superman curse.
Yeah, so we could look at Superman curse, Kennedy curse, all kinds of curses.
The 23 Club.
27.
The 27 Club, yeah.
That would be a good video too. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It was Kurt Cobain and there's 6 main ones, right?
There's 6 main ones, but there's a list of 47 others.
Yeah. I only found 6 when I did to be significant. What's that? Maybe she had 27 of them, yeah.
We just add 27 into the 27 club.
Was it Janis Joplin? Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain,
Amy Winehouse,
Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse, but more recent, compared to
the Doors, Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison, yeah. And there's one more famous one. I can't remember who it is. Yeah, there's
Mama Cass? No, I think she was older.
yeah, there's like, again, there are many, but there's like 6 core, like super famous 27 Club members.
They're called 27 Club because they are all musicians or actors who died at the age of 27.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Jones.
Brian Jones. Yeah. Yeah. All of them tragic in similar ways, and there's some slight differences throughout. But yeah. Very interesting. It all converged. I think, well, we could do that video. I think that would be a great podcast. The different factors that came together and how they, the theme that tied them together, and then the individual differences, but they still ended up in the same place, dying very young.
I mean, to be fair, you could pick any age and be like, okay, well, let's do the 42 Club, and pick 42, and then look at the variety of celebrities and say like, oh, well, all this one, they all died at 42.
If you want to do like the 83 Club, you can have a huge.
Right. like we could do the 83 Club, the ones who died in 1983, or just the ones who lived to 83.
Right.
I mean, we could do the 99 Club. Like, how many celebrities lived to be 99?
Betty White.
Betty White.
Yeah.
Well, it could be argued that she was 100, but like she was 17 days away from her 100th birthday.
How old was Prince Philip when he died? Was he 99?
I think so, something like that. He was up there.
I think Prince Philip had been my favorite royal, Prince Philip. I think that'd be another good video. Just looking at Prince Philip.
Yeah, he was 99.
He was 99, yeah. So we could do the 99 Club.
You could do the 99 Club. Like it's serious. People die at all ages. And so I mean, like 27 Club is interesting because because it seems to be coincidental, but there are a lot of very famous musicians who died at that age. And before it's because 27 is young. If you do the 56 Club or the 67 Club or the 99 Club, like, okay, there's old people. There's going to be a lot more mortality because they're older. The older you get, the higher mortality rate goes just in general. Mm-hmm. But 27 is that age you don't think of people dying.
Mm-hmm. No, it's enough time to get famous, but too early to die.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really famous. Like all those musicians were like legendary.
Right.
Even in their time. It's not all nostalgia. Like we look back and say, oh, Jimi Hendrix was really great. No, he was great in his time. Jim Morrison was great in his time. Yeah, that would be I think that'd be a great video to cover 27 Club. Mm-hmm. And you like music, right? That's your strong suit, right?
Thing, yeah.
Yeah, so that might be the perfect...
Like let Jeff come out of his shell a little bit more.
I was just looking at the list, and there's a blues musician, Robert Johnson, part of the, like, I guess kind of the original, 27 Club member, before it was even a thing. He died in 1938, and he's one that, like, there's a few pictures of him that remain, like a few known pictures of him. And I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of people on this list, but the person of, like, the 6 that you talked about, mm-hmm. The next person that would be from that would have been, like, 1969, maybe, or so. So, like, it would have been decades later. And so it's an interesting list, I mean, just to look it up, that there's people from, even from the 1800s that would have been, musicians as well, like composer, pianists, conductors, the first one on here. So it's an interesting list. It's an interesting concept too. That it's you're right. It's young, but it's like there's not a lot of overlap between some of them. I mean, other than the age. I mean, drugs is a big one.
I think two of the 6 died exactly. Was it 2 years apart or something?
I don't know. I'd have to look.
I thought there was a connection with the time, and I believe that the ones that survived were aware of the ones that died too, right? So people wonder, was this a selection bias? Were they self-selecting because they're like, oh, I'm destined to die young?
Amy Winehouse said that 3 years before she died. She said, I'm afraid I'm going to die at 27. Well, she was deep in addiction too, and that was a valid fear.
Yeah, for a
because
long
she
time.
knew how that was progressing and how difficult that was for her.
Yeah, she pretty much literally drank herself to death. Yeah. But yeah, that would be. I think that would be a good topic. We have to find a way to focus the time because you have 6 different people, at the core, and then all these others.
Yeah, at the core of the more famous handpicked ones that people tend to be more aware of. Because like the 18th or 19th century composer and pianist, most people in general aren't going to have a great deal of knowledge of.
I don't even know. Alexandre Levi, maybe? Levy? Yeah, I'm going to guess that most people don't know.
I'm pretty sure this is like the first recorded one because I'm almost positive in the entire history of humanity, there have been other musicians who have become famous and then died at 27.
That's not true. It's not true.
That first one was 1893, man.
I'm a purist on.
It was probably a time when the life expectancy was 27.
That's
I
probably
know in
fair.
colonial times, the United States, it was around 37. So 27 wouldn't have been like...
Abnormal.
To be fair about that, like the infant mortality rate was so high that
it was bimodal.
Yeah.
Right, you had a bunch of people at one end, and then people like Thomas Jefferson, who lived a long time, right? Was he 90? Something like that.
Was he part of the 99 Club?
I don't know if he was 99. I think he made it. I want to say he made it to 90, and so did John Adams. Can't remember. There's 2 of them. I think they died the same day, or
I think like 60 to 65 was more like if you survived through childhood,
right.
Your life expectancy was around 60 to 65. The average, because children didn't, had a lot of mortality rate at that point. I mean, there was a time in the United States and in other countries as well where you didn't name a child until their christening, and you didn't do their christening until they were like 2 at least.
Yeah,
and that's why, because if you name the child, you'll get too attached to them. It'll be harder when they die. So we don't name the kid. We just call them the baby or the babe, or the kid or whatever, and then when they reach 2, we have them christen and name them. That's when they get a name.
Wasn't there a movie, a Western, about there's a lot of ways to die in the West, something like that?
A Million Ways to Die in the West. It's
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, where they would go through all these like myriad ways that
Seth MacFarlane.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That movie was hilarious.
it was good.
Had a great Back to the Future gag.
Yeah,
Christopher Lloyd.
that was unexpectedly good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. It's so good.
I like the way they respected the Old West and really researched some of the causes. Reminds me of Red Dead Redemption. No,
Red Dead Redemption.
Red Dead Redemption. Yeah, 2. Yeah. Is there a 1? There must be a 1.
Yes, there is. Yeah. There's on Xbox, original Xbox. So there's rumors that they're going to be doing a remaster for some of the more modern systems, which I would be happy with because I didn't get a chance to play that one.
Yeah, I haven't got much time on it because Sniper Elite 4. down the rabbit hole of Sniper Elite 4, and now there's a Sniper Elite 5 coming out, so I'm never going to get back to it.
Yeah.
I know. I went down the Zelda wormhole. Like I just started back at the original Legend of Zelda, just playing through and trying to catch up on all of them because it's been. Yeah, I got to say, even as a gamer, I had never finished the original Legend of Zelda until recently. Like I started playing it and then got lost and was like, what am I supposed to do? I have no idea. But then, as an adult, I'm able to look at it and be like, okay, I got to do this. I got to use Google to figure out where I'm supposed to go if I get lost.
Resourceful. I mean, that's kind of stuff you learn as an adult, right? Use your resources.
And I've been playing Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, Middle Earth games.
I've never looked into those. I think I saw somebody recommended was it Far Cry 6 or whatever.
Far Cry 72.
That might be one I'll look at. But if Sniper Elite 5 comes out before I finish 4, then... Well, I mean, I've finished it, but, you replay it and many times with different weapons and stuff. Yeah. I always liked military history, specifically World War II, so that game really lined up nicely. All right. So do we have any ideas for an item for?
Just a giant chin. You can do a giant chin.
That's a pretty good idea. What do you put above a giant chin? Like, what's the rest of it?
Well, no, I just do the chin.
Yeah, but like, how does the top look in that? That's what I'm wondering.
I don't know, I can just stop at the lips.
Okay. Then do you have to have giant lips with that too?
Oh, probably, yeah.
I'm just wondering where that ends. Like,
Or I could go with the four corner mortarboard, the PhD.
I'm concerned the chin might end up looking obscene. Right. That's the.
That's
It's
fair.
possible. I could always just do a standard mortarboard as well.
You could do maybe like a some kind of published work, like, you know, maybe, I don't know what it would say on it, but something maybe on a pedestal or something that's, you know, looks official, or I don't know.
Bitcoin.
There you go.
I could print out a Bitcoin or a mortarboard. I think those are the two. Like the mortarboard could stand for the doctor, the Bitcoin for the memes,
There you go.
crypto memes. So there's our options: a mortarboard or a Bitcoin.
Very good. Yeah. So, any thoughts on that? Please put that in the comments. Like vote on that in the comments, and we'll see what happens there. I don't know which one of those is going to win. Usually, I'm pretty good at guessing, but I have no idea. They're both kind of interesting. So.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts about the twins?
Only thoughts I would have would just be about. I think there's a lesson to learn here. A lot of lessons. One that comes to mind would be
Careful with Botox.
be careful with Botox. Be careful with unnamed technologies. One lesson would be when you realize you're wrong, just admit that you're wrong and move on. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, to just surrender to that. And okay, I was wrong. That's it. It's what it is. I mean, these are lessons we learn as kids. You know, if you do something wrong, you know, you might have consequences. A parent might get mad at you, whatever. But just admit that you're wrong. Go say sorry. Apologize. Make amends. Whatever the case might be. And those are important lessons for a reason. It's something that is important throughout life. You make a mistake. You do something stupid. You do the wrong thing. Admit it. You know, make amends. Do whatever you need to do and move on. Will it be uncomfortable? Yes, probably. Will it feel bad? Probably. You know, could you have to face some kind of consequences for a while? Maybe, sure. But admit you're wrong and just move on. You know, part of having integrity and being a person of character, just admit you're wrong and move on. This is something that maybe could have really changed the trajectory for their lives, made their respect, how much people respected them kind of go up, as opposed to them just being celebrities that were just known for not having any more credibility or something, or the way they look. They could have actually been respected if they just admitted they were wrong and did something differently there. So not only with celebrities, but I think that's an important life lesson and something that maybe most people have to learn the hard way when they screw up and try to just go with it, and then realize that didn't work out. I should just admit that I was wrong and whatever. So that's something that I think would have helped them. And I think I could point to parts of my life too where I'm like, yeah, I had to learn that lesson too, but it helps you ultimately.
Thoughts, Mike?
I think my biggest takeaway was kind of a lot of what the takeaway of the Bogdanoff affair was for the scientific community, kind of that the courts should just stay out of the scientific publications. Like there a lot of courts, there are people who when I was going through this, they're like, oh, it was settled and and the Bogdanoffs were proven right. Like, no, they had a couple of cases where the courts said, yes, this is defamation. And one that was like, yes, this is a copyright issue. But there was never any consensus, especially in the scientific community, that their work is good. The consensus was their work is bad, is terrible, and was never reversed. That's why there were so many lawsuits from the Bogdanoffs. They were pushing back against people saying that they were bad at science, and the courts being involved in all of that kind of muddied the waters. And put a little bit more distrust in the scientific method into the public scope. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest takeaway is that government shouldn't be trying to mandate science. To an extent, there are ethical things that law should cover. I mean, we definitely shouldn't be engaging in scientific research about murder, where we're actually killing people.
Mm-hmm. Is ethics, right? Yeah.
But overall, like, science is its own thing, and it needs to have some of that freedom to check itself, review itself, and be able to look at each of us who are scientists and who try and bring something into the scientific community should be able to expect an adversarial response, because that's the only way we're going to prove it. The PhD programs that I'm aware of in the United States in order to get your PhD, you have to defend your thesis. You do, or your dissertation. Like, you do the research, you analyze the data, you write your paper, and you give it to your committee. They read it, and then they ask you questions, and you have to defend it. And in some cases, it's a little more than a formality because you've been working with your committee the entire time. They know everything that's going through it. In other cases, especially bigger universities, they don't. They haven't. But your committee is just randomly picked from the faculty in that college, and you stand before them to defend it after they've read it. They don't really know who you are. But that kind of adversarial response is necessary. Mm-hmm. We should expect it, and it should be welcome. But when we see responses like the Bogdanoffs to being challenged, it undercuts that.
Yeah, it was exceptionally petty, and many people were upset that the French government got involved with scientific freedom. Like, they wandered into an area they should have, the courts specifically. Also, I don't know about in France, but in the United States and many countries, the truth is an absolute defense against defamation. You can't defame somebody if you tell the truth. They were terrible scientists. That's the truth. I don't see, I'm like still waiting for the defamation part.
Right? It's like, well, they have a reputation, and saying that they're bad at science defames their reputation, regardless of whether it's true or not.
Not worried about that, yeah. And the copyright thing was just an end around. That was just they found a loophole from a guy who was a little impulsive and threw up the... You could argue, though, fair use. I mean, you might be able to argue it. I don't know if they have fair use in France.
I don't either. But apparently the courts were like, yeah, you should have taken into account their reputation before you did that. So apparently that has a...
See, I would argue that they were offering critique. So it would be a fair use. You put it up there and you're like, this is bad because of this, this, and this. Just like you could take a movie clip and say, this actor's doing this right now. This character, this is good or bad. Like, you're allowed to do that. It's fair use. But
I would say that is it really fair to pick an early draft?
Right, that would be
that's where I'm like, the early draft may not be representative of the final.
Yeah, you could make an argument there. I don't see that as a lawsuit, though. I see it more as like, they were quite petty.
Some of my early drafts of every bit of writing is just horrible.
Yeah. Well, then if it was,
that's what revision's for.
I always look at copyright too as about losing money. Like, that's the foundation of the whole. That's the basis of copyright law is if you're costing somebody money by taking their work. Mm-hmm. They weren't losing money,
right?
So, but yeah, they were quite unusual. Gave us a lot of other ideas for podcasts. Mm-hmm. Kennedy Curse, Superman Curse, Royal Family, and 27 Club.
George Reeves is still fascinating. I still find that one fascinating.
We'll get to them all eventually. As long as like COVID-related delays don't slow us down.
Yeah, we're back to recording. Back at it again.
Pending anything.
Yeah, and then next week, the world will end. And
COVID-22 will come along or something.
Well, we'll wrap this video up.
Zeta variant.
We'll wrap this video up at this point. Please put any comments or thoughts in the comment section. Remember to vote for what was it, a
The
mortarboard?
mortarboard
Bitcoin.
or the Bitcoin.
Yeah. And any thoughts, any ideas about the other podcast ideas we talked about? That'd be great too. Really, anything you feel like. We read the comments and appreciate them very much. We will be back, hopefully, pretty soon with another episode of Alien Lizard Humanoids and, of course, the murder part as well. Thank you so much.